Hey everyone, it's Nicole and today I'm here to wrap up the reading month of September and October. It's very unusual for me to say, but I've read a ton of books this past few months and I have to be grateful and to give kudos to audiobooks, which I finally got into. With the help of audiobooks, I'm actually confident that I will be able to finish the reading challenge on Goodreads this year on a high note. Since there are a lot of books to discuss, I'm not going to stall this video further and we're just going to jump into it. The first book that I finished in September was The Upstairs Room by Murray-Browne, which was a Patreon pick. If you want to affect what books I read and my TBRs, you can go and join my Patreon page and tell me what to do. So The Upstairs Room is an adult thriller that follows a family who moves into an old house. They think that the moving is going to be a fresh start for their family, but instead they are met with a lot of creepiness and unexplainable occurrences. The wife starts experiencing a lot of odd symptoms. She can't sleep, she feels ill, and every opportunity to get out of the house she takes with no hesitation. But when she brings these issues up to her husband, he tells her that they can't just move away from this house because it's their only option and they are out of money. This house makes their marriage even more miserable, and with every passing day the wife realizes that it's breaking their family up. It's a very interesting book, I really enjoyed it. The horror element in this book is not appearances of ghosts or demons, it's the mundane, the usual issues that we have with each other that happen to everyone, and it makes the story much more scary. I think this book checked a lot of boxes for me personally because it was both suspenseful and it was filled with terror at certain scenes, but I knew that it's not going to go into the horror area. I knew that the maniac is not going to appear on their doorstep. I knew that there's not going to be a ghost. I really enjoyed it. The next book that I read was The Summer of Jordi Perez by Spalding. It was much cuter and fluffier and also really entertaining. It's a contemporary queer romance and I loved it to pieces. It follows a girl named Abby who is obsessed with fashion and wants to get an internship with a local dress shop, but when she comes to the shop, the owner tells her that she's going to have a little competition. There's the second girl that passed the interview and her name is Jordi Perez. Jordi is a photographer and that's where her aspirations lie. So the owner of the shop feels like Abby's experience with fashion blogging and blogging for plus-sized women particularly, and Jordi's photography skills is going to upgrade the store. The problem is that at the end of the day only one of them will get a permanent job. So this is your classic hate to love, although they don't especially hate each other, they are just competing for the same spot, which in my book is even better. I love this book so fucking much. It is cute, it is written well, it flies by so quickly. I've read this book so fast. It takes the classic formula of a romance novel and it twists it a little and it introduces new conflicts, which I really liked. I loved all the characters. I think this book was really good and I recommend it to people who are looking for cute romances with a little bit more to offer. The next one was for sure a Patreon pick. It was The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang. I picked it up because people were hyping it up so much on BookTube. And for a good reason. It's a very good book. There's a lot of things that I enjoyed about it. Overall I gave it 4 stars. I think I would have given it 3.8 if I could on Goodreads, but we don't have this option still. It follows a woman named Stella Lane who creates algorithms to predict purchasing behavior. She makes a lot of money doing it, she's very successful at her job, but she's not very successful in her love life. Part of the reason why is because she has Asperger's, and in the past she encountered a lot of people that were awkward about it or that didn't really get her. So when Stella's mother starts to push her to date again, Stella comes up with a plan. She realizes that she's extremely inexperienced when it comes to dating and sex. So she hires an escort that's going to help her with both of these things. The book is written in a very engaging way. It prompts you to root for Stella in her relationship with Michael, the escort that she hires. But when I got to the middle point, I knew how the story is going to unfold, and it was very predictable to me. The book is very steamy too, and if at first I was into it because well-written sex is always good, and the sex in this book was written well, it was sexy, but at the same time it conveyed how important it is to communicate when you're having an intimate relationship with someone. But at some point there are too many sex scenes, and this book turns into a sex marathon without much plot, which was annoying. I love that this book was written by a woman who is on the spectrum. Stella's thoughts and feelings felt very authentic on the page. I immediately could envision her and I cared about her. I also enjoyed the way she was portrayed as someone very professional and rich and successful, and that she wasn't dependent on her parents, which we often see with characters who are on the spectrum. Michael, the love interest, was also half Vietnamese, and it's nice to see more Asian men in romances because we don't see them often there, and it's a bummer. The other positive thing that I have to say about this novel is that it reads very quickly and that I was pretty excited about reading it. I felt very autumnal and I was pumped for Halloween, so I picked up Kate Arden's Small Spaces. It's a middle grade book, which is an unusual pick for me. I don't read middle grade much, I have not read middle grade for ages, and I was surprised how adventurous and fun it was. Writing middle grade is no joke. You can't rely on Insta romances because kids at that age don't even care for romances yet. The book is set in a small farming town in Canada, and it follows a young girl whose mother passed away. She doesn't have a lot of friends, but she's very adventurous, she loves books and stories, and she always wanted to be the protagonist of one of the stories that she reads all the time, and she becomes one. One day when she's biking in the woods, she encounters a distressed woman who wants to throw an ancient book into the river. But the girl saves the book and discovers a story about a smiling man that grants wishes. It's a little creepy, but not creepy enough to disturb an adult. I found that the balance between friendships and family issues and adventures and fun was fantastic, with the creepy supernatural things that were happening, and in some way it reminded me of the Stranger Things, the TV show, except the protagonist was a girl. Then I picked up a very exciting release, which was a Patreon pick too. It was What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. Instead of reading it as a physical copy or an ebook, I bought an audiobook and I was listening to it. I think it helped because there were two narrators and each covered one of the boys. This is a very autumnal romance, and yes, you've heard me well, it's not a contemporary novel, it's a romance novel. I think a lot of people go into it expecting that it's going to be a contemporary young adult novel that is going to cover a lot of topics, but it's actually just a romance novel. And I don't have any issues with that. It was a very quick read for me. I was very invested in the fates of the characters, and I have to say that the romance was bittersweet. I loved this novel though. I give it 5 stars, and I don't even get the criticism of it. The two protagonists meet at a post office, in New York City. One of them is actually from Georgia. He comes to New York to work for his mother's law firm. And the other boy has Puerto Rican roots and he lived in New York for his whole life. They meet at the post office that they came to for different reasons and sparks fly, but neither of them is brave enough to ask for another's phone number. So a decent amount of the book they spend trying to find each other. And some people had an issue with that. When you have a misconnection like that, the first thing you go to is social media, which is completely normal. Just so you know, stalking, and we're used to throw this word very willy-nilly these days, is the act of crime of willfully and repeatedly following and harassing another person in circumstances that would cause a reasonable person to fear injury or death, especially because of express or implied threats. So calling people that are trying to find you through social media, public social media, stalkers, is such a stretch. I really enjoyed the book. I thought that both Silvera's voice and Becky Albertalli's voice mashed well together. I think that darker topics that were introduced were Silvera's work. That's one of the reasons why I'm hesitant to pick up his books. He seems to always gravitate towards sadder stories, and I'm not into that. But I really loved their shared project, and I actually think that it will make a great movie. Then I realized that I completely fallen off from Fence by C.S. Pacat, and I wanted to get back into it, so I bought a few issues and I read it. It is still so fascinating for me. I love the story. I think there's finally change between the characters and their relationships start to develop. I don't like reading graphic novels by issues, but I really like the story and I want to read more. It's just, it comes out so slowly. It's such a drag. Only 3 books left to discuss, and the next one is Sadie by Courtney Summers, which was such a fantastic young adult thriller. I didn't expect a lot from young adult thrillers. I've read some of it in the past and I found it to be too bland and too safe. Sadie is a lot of things, but not safe. I also listened to it on audio, and I recommend to everyone who listens to audiobooks to listen to this one because it is a production. I loved it so fucking much. I think Sadie is such an unusual character for thrillers and for young adult fiction in general. She is very violent, she has a lot of aggression issues, but on the outside she appears to be weak and people underestimate her a lot. She also stutters, and I think they made such a great job in the audiobook at voicing her. The story is very cool. It has 2 point of views. The first one is Sadie's point of view, and the second one is the point of view of an investigative journalist who was given the task of investigating the death of a young girl, Sadie's sister, and he creates the podcast that he names The Girls. The story was very suspenseful, it was written very well, it gave you space to wonder who the killer was and start your own investigation in your mind. It also used the dual point of view in a very smart way. So I highly recommend this book if you're into thrillers, especially if you were hesitant about it because it's young adult. It's really good. It's so fucking good. I won't spoil you about the storyline, but there's an important trigger warning that I have to give you, which is it has to do with sexual abuse and sexual assault of minors. Then on a whim I picked up Undead Girl Gang by Lily Anderson, and it was so much fun. I can't even. It was like The Craft, but a little less dark. It is about a Latinx girl named Mila whose friend died recently. The police tells her that it was a suicide, that she slipped on the rocks and that she drowned in the river, but she doesn't believe it, especially because not so long ago a few other people died from their school, and she believes that it was a targeted attack. And because no one wants to investigate the case, she's left on her own. One time when she hangs out in the secret house in the woods that she used with her friend to do all the wicked stuff, a book appears on her doorstep, and in this book she finds a spell that promises to resurrect her friend for 7 days, and she performs it, and to her surprise, her friend actually comes alive. But she's not the only one that comes alive. All the people that died a little earlier also come out of their graves. So now she has an undead girl gang, and they are going to investigate the case together. It was a lot of fun, and I love all the witchy stuff. I love witches in general, and I'm always excited to see them. It was very much like an urban fantasy TV show where you get the dark things, but you also get a lot of humor. And the last book was sent to me for an honest review by Riverhead Books, and I can't be more grateful because I loved it so much. It changed my life. It filled the hole in my heart that was left by The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And the book I'm talking about is The Airy Breath by Frances de Pontes, Peebles. I loved this book. I loved it so much. I can't even find words how genius it is. It's historical fiction, which I love very much. Half of it is set in 1930s Brazil, and half of it is set in Hollywood. I love Hollywood stories. I loved it in The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and I loved it in this book. The first 15% of the book were slow, so I thought I'm not going to get into it. But the moment the characters were left to their own defenses, I literally couldn't unglue my hands from the book. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know what's going to happen. I'm a sucker for stories about famous people and fictional famous people too. It follows a girl in 1930s Brazil whose name is Doris. She works at a sugar plantation, and she doesn't believe that a lot of things are going to change in her life, but they do when the plantation is changing hands and a new family moves into the old house. With them comes their little girl named Graça, and Graça and Doris become friends. Graça has a lot of hopes and desires for her future. She expects to be a famous singer, and those fantasies push Doris to want more in life too. The story is told from the point of view of Doris when she's an older woman, reminiscing about her past life and her friend and all the tribulations of their life that in the end made them famous. I love this story so much, the complexity of it. I loved Graça as a character, I loved Doris as a character, and you would think that Graça would be a little bit more grey as a person whose story is being told, but Doris herself is not really a good person every time, and we see her in different situations making very questionable choices. I enjoyed most of the characters in this book, and I thought that they were very realistic and weren't painted in black and white only. There are also queer characters in this story, which made me even more happier, and the development of the relationship between Doris and Graça was such a curious thing to witness. It was very engaging, and as I said, I couldn't put the book down. There's a video from Adriana from Perpetual Pages, and they say it better than I could why this novel needs to be read. So I'm just going to direct you there. These are all the books that I've read in September and October. In the comments down below, tell me if you read any of those books, or maybe if you're curious about them. Thank you for watching this video. I hope to see you soon in my next one. Bye!